Welcome back to the Marketing MadMen on Extra 106.3. Nick Constantino here with Shena Simmons, the CEO of Stewart Simmons. And let's just get that out of the bag. Why is it called Stewart Simmons and not Shena Simmons?
So Stewart's my maiden name.
Okay.
And so a lot of times people ask me, who's Stewart? And I'm like, I am both Stewart and Simmons. I hate to disappoint you, but it's just me.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
And I will say, I did not want something that was like kitschy and like all game day-y. And so that's where Stewart Simmons came from, is I didn't want like a game day clothes, you know?
Well, I think kitschy, look, when you're building a brand long term, very few people go with kitsch. And there's a reason, because the allure wears off and like you set yourself up for long-term failure. So I like the approach. One of the things I noticed just from browsing the e-commerce site, you're not your own logo heavy. You let the brands speak for themselves. So I'm curious, was that strategic? Is that part of the long-term vision? How did that come about? Did you realize it was happening? Because what happens a lot of times, and let's use Onward Reserve is a great example, right? They're co-branded, but that On Reserve is everywhere. They beat you over the head with it. Vineyard Vines, my goodness, if I see a stupid whale on someone's shirt gigantically, and you're almost detracting from the point, which is the team logo. So what was your thought process there?
No, that's exactly right. Like, people are wearing Miami, Florida State stuff because they want to support Miami or Florida State. That being said, I feel like we have done such a good job of making our brand and our designs recognizable that we will always get messages from people being like, hey, I was in Vegas for the LSU game and I saw your stuff everywhere. And so I love the fact that we've been able to build the brand and let people know, like, hey, that's a Stewart Simmons product.
Without hoarding the logo out everywhere.
Without putting the logo everywhere on it. So to me, that even feels, that's even cooler, is that people know and they recognize that it's us, even though it's not listed all over the product.
I like it. I think it probably is harder for new customer acquisition and loyalty of new people, because I think people, unfortunately, have become very brand centric, and I feel like they would just want to brag. I mean, you know, you're not going to buy a Vineyard Vines $89 shirt because it's any different than the $20 shirt. You're buying it because you want to show people that you wear Vineyard Vines.
But I sort of love the humble brag, right? Like they're showing up in a Stewart Simmons shirt that's still $140, and if you know, you know, like people there. They know what it is, and they know the brand without it saying it all over.
I like it. And it's funny. It's one of those things you kind of age into also. When I was younger, I was like, I don't care what it looks like. Yeah. Now, as I'm no. I want something that will fit right, that won't fall apart in 2 days. Like, if it happens to be a Peter Millar shirt, so be it, right? There's a reason, to some extent, that things cost more money, and I think you find that out, and I'd rather have one good thing that'll last for 5 years than two crappy things that'll last for a year and a half each. Like, that's simple math at some point.
Absolutely.
Yeah, love it. So you've been in business since 2016. So how has the apparel space changed? How has the collegiate licensing space changed? And what would you go back and tell yourself now when you were starting in 16? That's a loaded question with a lot in it. So I'm going to give you some time in this one. But I'm most curious of how this has all changed, because it sounds like it's been, you're talking 8-9 years. That's an eternity in this space.
It is, especially when you're talking about fashion. Right. And so what was cool, certainly 8 years ago, is not at all what we're doing now. I mean, the styles change.
And things cycle faster.
Absolutely.
Right, the 80s came back, and then you're in the 90s. I mean, wait a second. You're talking about a decade. How did it happen in a year and a half?
And what we really pride ourselves on doing is taking everyday styles that people are wearing out on the streets and making them game day. Right. And so we're trying to make things, and we're not figuring out what's going to be cool 5 years from now. But we're like, what do people want to wear, and how can we make that, UGA specific? And so we're constantly having to move faster in that space. As far as licensing, schools have gotten more and more selective with who they want to bring on board. And we're in a lucky space now where we've been doing this for long enough, and we have the sales numbers to show it, that we don't have a hard time getting a license anymore. But for people that are new to the business or want to come into a licensed space, they want to work with fewer and fewer licensing partners. They want to work with Hanes or whomever it is and kind of have exclusives with them. And so it is becoming more difficult to get into this game day space.
Yeah, so two parts have how I understand this. Number one is most schools don't even control their own rights anymore. They hand these off to the Learfields, the IMGs, the Van Wagners, the Legends, who we have very close relationships with. I know all of them, and I know their business models are different because they are bigger companies with a bigger web and more want to deal with bigger national brands that have multiple places. And some of it's logistics, just to make it easier. Some of it's accounting software. You're paying licensing fees and to streamline it. But at the same time, I think that stagnates some of these brands. And if you are a smaller tier school, then the fashion lines you choose to partner with can build popularity for you if done the right way.
Yeah.
Right? Georgia doesn't need you or anybody else to put that G on there. Georgia's G explains it for itself. That being said, I don't know if that was the case 15 years ago or 10 years ago.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it is just, I get it from a brand's perspective, right? They want to be protective. The school should be protective of their university and who's putting stuff out there. For me, I see so much value in bringing diversity to the market. I see so much value in being able to go into a sports store and buy from different brands. And so I understand every bit of it, but I am also thankful that they're still allowing smaller brands to come in and get their foot in the door.
Yeah, I think there is a societal obligation these days. I think that I've never seen a more anti-corporate tone out there. People don't want to buy from the big guy right now.
Yeah.
I think politically it's funny. I think politically that the left and the liberals and the Democrats were the ones perceived as anti-corporate, and I think somehow it's switched a little bit. That now you watch the Republicans, they're like, oh my God, these corporations are destroying the world.
Well, this is a fun conversation. I didn't know we were getting into politics.
I didn't
Was it because of the debate last night? It's like still on your head.
I just find it fascinating that the anti-corporate rhetoric has switched sides.
Yeah.
No, it's happened in this country a million times.
Yeah.
But the point is, I think that people, look, they want to buy from the little guy until it gets too cost prohibitive or hard to do so. So for you, it's setting a price point that's right, a niche market that's right, and convenience that's right, which is why I'm sure the e-commerce makes a ton of sense.
It does. And for us, it's also like, how long are we going to be the little guy? Like we've really marketed ourselves as like, we're a brand that you know us, right? You know the people that are in the brand and they know our story. And we continue to grow, but we still want to be not Nike, if you will.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's an interesting place as far as how do we position the brand.
I'm curious, and please punch me in the face if I'm prying. How big is the market, and what would you say your market share is in the licensed space?
Our market share is so small.
It's nearly impossible to know because they don't send these things out.
Yeah, we don't know. I will tell you, we've gotten to a place where like, if you buy women's game day apparel in one of these markets, you know who we are, right? And so we're really proud of that, but we still have so much room for growth.
Got it, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
And women's game day apparel is not even a market that people would even think exists. So,
but it's so big.
Again, I spend much of days. I will be in Athens at 9 a.m. on Saturday getting our tailgate ready to be in the middle of that. So I've seen it from the early through. I've seen how people set up. I mean, people are up there at 6 o'clock in the morning building their cities in the tailgates and everything. And it's whether the team is good or bad. I mean, right? But
there are more of them when the team is good. For sure.
Look, Auburn sucks. Auburn sucked for a long time, okay? So the Auburn fans coming up there, there's no more or less of them that are going up there to Georgia.
But, you know, we have found that every fan base is different. And truthfully, some of them are more loyal than others.
I know. Now we're getting into the fun conversation.
I shouldn't poke my finger in it. I shouldn't.
Talk about loyalty. So how about you throw out some markets or places and I guess which franchises
I'm not playing this game with you. That's cool. I will tell you one thing. We very, very strongly believe in preseason sales.
Okay.
That we launch a collection August 1st, and we do everything we can to sell the heck out of that collection before games start.
Because they're undefeated.
Exactly. As soon as teams start to lose, I mean, it becomes really difficult for us.
And I think that's getting harder. And I think this is part of the problem when money comes into this, right? Florida State was number 6 in the country because Florida is a big state, and if they build hype there, more people will watch. And I don't care what they say. I don't care if Condoleezza Rice is still picking this stuff. They are picking where the money is, right? That's why you don't see North Dakota State ever ranked at anything. One, because they're never going to be good at anything, it's just unfortunately, but it's because there's no people there to build hype around. Yeah. That is why you see Notre Dame fail year after year after year because the fan base is so big. That is why you think that college football wanted Texas to stay bad. There is no one on earth that is going to try to tell me that this has not been some master plan ploy. And come after me for all it's worth. Well, I'm not even touching NIL, so you owe me one, college football. Talk about some fan bases that have surprised you, that you would never expect them to be fan bases that are pre-selling or that are doing really well, and some of the opposite. Well,
here's what I will say. One of the things that we have learned over the years that up-and-coming teams, right? So like Georgia has been huge for us for years, but at some point, like they've been after year 3 or 4, everybody kind of has all their stuff, right?
Sure.
And
for
so
sure.
like Tennessee is a good example. Like 5 or 6 years ago, we couldn't get rid of Tennessee inventory. But for the past few years, there's so much excitement. Like that is the sweet spot.
Yeah, that's the hype. That's the hype machine.
It's the hype phase.
That's usually a coach in his 3rd or 4th year who has hype. He's got his big. They've won 1 or 2 big games. They've had a couple big name guys come out. But I have to imagine, you're right. I mean, even going into a 3-peat last year for Georgia, the hype wasn't the same amount of hype.
Yeah, so it's us finding the schools when they're just hot and there's that hype phase.
Yeah.
And listen, for us, because we have to buy inventory so far before the season starts, this stuff is so important for us. Like understanding what's going on in the team and trying to project how much inventory we're going to buy across 34 schools and 700 SKUs. That's huge.
Yeah, so we're going to get real nerdy. Yeah. What kind of CRM systems are you using? Are you using AI to predetermine? Are we bringing this stuff in? Who's doing the intuition?
We're using me and Excel. That's what we use. And luckily, that finance background, like one of my favorite things to do is to sit down and run numbers.
I can't tell you. I was a finance I was a finance major because I was going to take what was called decision information systems.
Yeah.
I took a math 116 class. I walked in and 3 minutes later I walked out and changed my major. It was not, that was not a thing that was in my level of, I didn't want to do it.
That's one of the things I still hold on to and really love to do, honestly, is sit down and just start to project. Like, what do we think is going to happen for the year? How much inventory should we be buying across all these schools? And we've been doing this at enough of the schools for so long that we've got sales data, right? Like we have a good feel for how much to bring in every year. But then, you lose a game or two and all that's out the window.
Yeah. I have to imagine like Florida's got to be one of those tricky ones. I mean, that school, and look, I see the other side of college sports, right? Like Florida, for what it's worth, and I know the public perception is my God, the football team, they have a $5 billion research budget. If you look at U.S. News and World Report, they are a top public institution year after year.
Yeah.
What do they care about the football team? I know, I get it, and I know that you have to put on these airs that, it's so important, it's Florida. But what does UNC Chapel Hill care about the sports teams? What does Michigan? Michigan is one of the most prominent institutions in the world. What do they care? Like Georgia Tech, for what it's worth, we're with them all the time. I love those guys, but there's so much more for them to hold their hat on, the prominence of the institution. So I think it's going to get messier. I think NIL is going to change a lot of this. What about things that have come up that you would never thought when you were starting your business career? Again, we'll go back to the advice you would give yourself back in 2016.
Oh man, I think it's very intimidating to think about building a brand, right? Intimidating to think about starting a clothing company. I will say this, like you don't need $50 million to start selling clothes. I started with hardly any money. I started with a HELOC on my mortgage, right? And all we've done is simply invested everything that we have back into the business. I feel like when I started this, I thought of fashion as being, you think it's glamorous, right? Even we're talking, you picture tailgates and it's runways and all the things. Fashion and retail is a lot of grunt work.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot of figuring out logistics and spending time doing forecasts and all the things. But man, there is nothing to me. So I love college sports. I love college football. There's nothing to me that is better than going to Athens on a Saturday and seeing a third of the girls walk by wearing stuff that we designed.
Well,
I mean, it doesn't matter how much work it is.
I love it.
It all pays off.
I love it because now I get to be more aware of it and I get to see it in real time because it was not anything that was ever brought to my attention. So my wife is it's just not her thing. It was just, she wasn't born in the U.S.
So football or
she became a college basketball fan because she spent a semester at Duke.
Okay.
And it's like contagious at somewhere like Duke. So, but I've taken her to games in Sanford. She fell asleep in Sanford.
Oh no.
Like we've gone, I've tried. She went to Georgia State. I'd be like, let's go to a Georgia State game. We sat courtside for Georgia State versus Southern. She loved that.
Yeah.
But it's more,
give me a box and I can't say no,
It's more that. Now, you bring up a fun point because I wonder what's going to happen. Like my daughter is 7. She has only sat floor seats, courtside, luxury suite, or she's never seen anything else. So I don't know what kind of fan she's going to be. But, I think the nature of how we interact with sports has changed so much. I remember, and it's funny, I was watching a documentary about Greg Maddux, and like they show these pictures of old fat white men at Wrigley Field with no shirts on, just sitting in the outfield in the 80s. And like that's the experience that was there. Like when you would pay, $1.50 to get into a game.
Right.
Now, and NIL is going to further contribute to this, like the schools are going to want so much money, it's going to be that you're going to leave so many people out of the experience.
Yeah.
And does that extend to fashion? We're yet to see.
Yeah, I don't know, because for us, and I've said, like, hey, we're making game day apparel for you to wear at home and celebrate or whatever it may be, but really from the Stewart Simmons perspective, our stuff is the glitz and the glam, right? Like, we're really selling stuff for people that are showing up to show off on game day.
Right,
and so,
but
like,
you can show up in your house, you're right, to watch the game.
You can, but like, it's the people that are investing the type of money in our stuff, they're a lot of times there in Athens at the game.
Yeah, I think, you brought up a good funny point about grunt work. So like my business, especially 680 The Fan and what we do on the sports side is very similar, right? Everyone sees we're broadcasting live from the World Series. Everyone sees my World Series ring that the Braves gave me. No one knows the grunt work that went into making that stuff happen. And the sponsorships and making sure the radio station stays on. There was a hurricane here. If this radio station goes off, we are breaking like 15 different FCC laws. So I think it's true of most industries. And I think, fashion just seems to be the one, because we have the eyes on Vogue and these magazines that it's
all glitz and glamour. And you brought up COVID earlier, and I forgot to speak to it, but like, we were doing fashion during COVID, in which we didn't know if football games were going to happen. We had factories that were closed or not closed. Like, that's the amount of...
At least we weren't in the Northeast when that was all happening.
Yeah, yes.
I mean, this freaking stadium, they said it was going to be closed for the year. One day later, like, nope, 25%. 2 days later, like 50%. 3 days later, like, what, screw it. Just let everybody in. Who cares?
Well, and we're trying to figure out what's going to happen 5 months ahead of time, right? Because we're trying to buy inventory for games that are happening in August.
And it was all stuck overseas, and then you see Long Beach Port.
And then those things are closing, and the factories are open.
And then all of a sudden, they come in, and you're inundated with inventory that you can't get rid of.
Yeah, and so it's the amount of work, but just the dang amount of stress that goes in.
Well,
like, we get, to this day, we get products that show up at our warehouse every year, and I feel like I just want to do a happy dance. Like, the amount of work to get it here into our hands is so much.
Yeah, and so one of the things I'm not going to pretend to be any fashion expert, but just anecdotally from watching, like Nautica, Tommy Hilfiger, Polo, they all went to crap when they started showing up in Marshalls, and they discounted their own prices, and they discounted their own brands, and it is very hard to recover from that. And their simple response was, oh, that's Chaps by Ralph Lauren. It's not the same brand, but that's not how things work. So talk about how you protect the brand integrity when you're stuck with all this extra merchandise, because it's got to be a fine line to walk.
100%. I have found that so much of protecting the brand is choosing who you partner with.
Okay.
So retail is a huge piece of it, and we're very protective over who we sell our products to. And we've had some similar not Marshalls, but similar type retailers.
I'm not bashing them. They are actually one of the most, the TJ Maxx Corporation is one of the most successful institutions because the way they curate every store better than Macy's.
Yes.
These days, it looks like Macy's, they took a bomb, they threw it in the middle of Macy's, they let it go off, and then that's where the stuff lands.
It's a mess.
If you go into good Marshalls or good, it is very well curated with the things that people want. It's not a criticism, but back in the 90s when I was growing up, they took brands that were these prominent, prestigious brands that all men, immediately, they just devalued them by throwing them there.
You can't be all things to all people, right? We know that, and I think that's oftentimes what brands try to do. And so for us, in order for us to stay a premium brand, we can only work with select retailers. We know that, and we have ones that come to us, and we've considered that. Well, do we stick a new name on it? But we can't do that. We can't sell to Marshalls, and this is not people we sell to. But you can't sell to Marshalls and Neiman Marcus, right? You cannot do that, and so you have to be really careful.
So what do you do with it? What do you do with inventory that's left over?
You either discount it to your current retailers that you're working with, or you sit on it, because I guarantee you, Florida State may not turn it around this year, but we're going to at some point. And we had stuff I talked about 4 or 5 years ago. We couldn't get rid of Tennessee stuff to save our lives, but it's all gone now, right? It comes back, and so sometimes it's just a matter of being patient and holding it until the team comes back.
And one of the things that I love is the jeans and t-shirt will always be in style. Yeah. There's some things that we get so over infatuated. Like, guys, hold on a second, okay? Since the 1890s, a pair of Levi's jeans with a t-shirt was in fashion. In 1,000 years, if you come back here, that will be in fashion. Okay, there are some things that don't change. And, I think how big logos are on shirts and graphic tees and stuff, that goes in and out of style very quickly, right? I tend to be just dark, like just colors. Like, there's no logos on anything I have because I don't get to go out often, right? If I go out 12, 15 times a year, I have like 100 shirts sitting there. But I think there are some things, and if you're smart enough to know to not fall victim of buying the trendy things all the time, I think you can avoid a lot of that trap. But that being said, that's not what Instagram teaches you. It teaches you fast fashion. And look at the boots this girl was wearing. She's popular. Let's go this route.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that too. I've talked about projections and being careful about ordering inventory. I don't order 5,000 of anything that we bring in. Right? We would much rather sell out of something than continue to sit on it.
But that hurts margins because you're not buying as much bulk.
Yeah.
So
but it also trains our customers. Hey, if I want this Stewart Simmons product, I got to buy it when they launch, because if I come back on October 1st, it's not going to be there. And so I would rather have that. I would rather have them pooling and asking for more than us just trying to stuff product down their throats.
Yeah, and that was near impossible 10 years ago, 15 years ago, to run business that way. And you kind of see one of the things, and I'm curious, we have 3 more minutes in this segment. So one of the things I've found about fashion, so I think social media is a great advertising platform for e-commerce and fashion, because you can track a sale all the way to beginning to end. You learn the data on the audience. But I have found that once people realize that every fashion company just bombards social media with the same messaging, and they're just beating the crap of each other for the same audience, the same people. What has your experience been with social media, with advertising, with e-commerce? How have you built the brand? Is it been organically? Because that will be a good segue into the last segment. We'll get a little bit more nitty gritty and talk a little bit about the future.
Yeah, social media is so important for us. And we, people are getting our products either through our website or through our retailers. We're not a little store sitting there kind of getting to talk to folks. And so we use it as a way to get people to know us. But I talked about how important it is as a brand, who you align yourself with from a retailer perspective. But I also think it's equally important who you align yourself with when you're talking about other brands and influencers. And so we spend a lot of time going through social media and trying to figure out, well, hey, who is like one of our target markets that went to Tennessee or wherever it may be, and working with those people to create authentic experiences for their followers.
Yeah.
And align them with Stewart Simmons.
Yeah, which much easier said than done.
Oh my gosh.
Every person in every marketing movement in the world is saying those exact words. It is not easy. It is not easy to do. And I think one of the biggest problems is that all of a sudden the word influencer has become trendy. So now there's this whole industry behind influencers, and it is so easy to fake social media followings. It is so easy to buy your way into these mechanisms.
Yeah.
And the one of the things most people don't know, but for a radio station to operate, we have an FCC license, we have affidavits, we have EEO requirements, we are government mandate, there are audits, there's so much that goes into it. You can put anything you want on social media with any claim. There's not a level of regulation. There's nowhere to be found. And it's not a criticism, because Zuckerberg has said it best. He's told Congress, do something about it. They're just too old and stagnant to do anything about it. But how is the brand? How have you built the brand? Because what I know about social media, it's that ROI. It's that quick, instantaneous. Yeah. I want you to think about it a little bit. When we talk about it come back from the break, we're going to talk about that brand building, because I think it's been a lost art in marketing these days. Everyone wants data, and you cannot create an emotional response with data. You cannot. The best ads in your head were not, oh my God, they really hit those data points for me. It was an emotional in your head that created like, that's cool.
It's the Publix ad that made you cry. It happens to me every time.
And every year you expect it to come, and now
you
want to be
and then it comes, and I'm still crying.
You want to be out-cried. I mean, if anyone's mastered the art of that, it's Disney. I mean, I watched Inside Out too. I'm like, there's no way I'm going to cry like the first one.
Oh, sure.
An hour in, I'm like, oh my God, it's even more, because my daughter's older now, and it's fit me perfectly. Okay, so we went off topic, but luckily this segment's about to end, and we'll come back and we'll finish the conversation. You've been listening to the Marketing MadMen on Extra 106.3. We'll be right back.